Hi everyone, this is Rayon Paper. Today we will be continuing the ink swatching series with the fourth and last selection of green fountain pen inks. Most of these inks are unsaturated greens, with some being still quite green and some being almost grey. Some are very dark, whereas others are very light. We don't have too many sheeners today, but we do have 3 shimmer inks. As always, I'll be using a glass of water, my Pilot Iro Uchishi dip pen in fine, my makeshift sample vial holder and an old towel. I'll be swatching on 52 GSM Tomoe River paper, and with all of that said, let's get swatching. The first ink is Nahvalur Dark Forest. Dark Forest is part of the Nahvalur Explorer series, and it's one of the darkest inks we'll see today. It's a dark green, slightly on the cooler side. In the swatch it has a bit of shading, but in the writing it's mostly just a dark green. The ink displays a bit of black sheen as well. Diamine Deep Dark Green is a Cult Pen's exclusive ink. It's part of the Deep Dark set of inks. It's quite similar to Nahvalur Dark Forest. Deep Dark Green is also a slightly cooler dark green. However, I think Diamine Deep Dark Green is just a little more saturated, a little less greyish. Like Dark Forest, Deep Dark Green also has some black sheen. It's a little more prominent in Deep Dark Green, showing up in the writing as well. Then we have Herbin Vert Empire, or Imperial Green. Vert Empire is a very unsaturated green with beautiful shading. In the wettest parts, the color leans a bit towards blue. This is one of those inks where if you Google it, you'll find a lot of swatches that look very different, with most being in the same ballpark as mine, but others being a lot greener. Next up we have Sailor Kyokuya. Kyokuya is part of the Yurameku line of inks. These inks are known to look very different on various types of paper. On this paper, which is Tomoe River paper, the ink shades towards a purplish blue. Therefore, when dry, the bigger swatch seems wildly out of place on this page. However, the writing with the fine nib doesn't shade that much, revealing more of its green base color. On some types of paper, for example the Clairefontaine Triumph, the ink shades to a dark green. Crazy, huh? Then we have Robert Oster Avocado. When wet, this ink doesn't look all that unsaturated, but it loses much of its color when it dries. What remains is a subtle muted green color. I don't actually know many inks that share like this same exact hue. A lot of these inks have hints of blue, but Avocado is still very green, just not that saturated. I like this one a lot. Dominant Industry Autumn Forest is a really unique ink in my opinion. Its base color is an unsaturated brownish olive green with quite a bit of shading. And on top of that, it's a shimmer ink with a fairly unexpected combination. The shimmer is a reddish pink, or pinkish red if you will. I know that the name is Autumn Forest, but in my head this ink is called Magical Fantasy Forest. For a gold shimmer, we turn to Robert Oster Jewel in the Crown. Jewel in the Crown is about as dark or light as Autumn Forest, but it's a bit on the cooler side. It leans less towards brown and more towards grey. The ink displays quite a bit of shading, which in combination with the gold shimmer makes this an interesting ink to write with. Our third and last shimmer ink of today is Diamine Alpine. Diamine Alpine was first introduced in the 2022 Green Inkvent calendar. The base color is a cool-toned, greyish leaning green. It's a bit darker than the other 2 shimmer inks I just swatched. The shimmer is silver, and there is a lot of it. I found this combination wonderful as it truly reminds me of an alpine landscape in winter with pine trees covered in a thick layer of snow. The next ink is another Cult Pen's exclusive ink made by Diamine, and it's called The Great Wall of China. This ink is part of the Wonders of the World collection, which features some lovely lighter muted colours. For the Great Wall of China, Diamine picked a greyish, fairly unsaturated green, with some nice shading. The ink is very well behaved, it's neither very wet nor very dry. Then we have Ferris Wheel Press Moss Bark Green. Compared to Diamine's The Great Wall of China, Ferris Wheel Press Moss Bark Green is a tad cooler and even less saturated. This ink was one of my favourite ink discoveries of last year, but I also understand why some may find this colour a bit too boring, a bit too faded. It has wonderful shading, however, it is worth noting that the ink has quite a dry flow. Next up is Dominant Industry Winter Pine. Winter Pine is first of all a very light ink. I think it's still legible, but I do prefer having natural light when I write with this. The most interesting part of this ink is perhaps not its base color, but the fact that it is a chromo shading ink. It shades to a light pink with a rim of green sheen that is a bit darker than the base color. Sailor Ink Studio number 162 is another chromo shading ink. Let's start with the base color. I debated for the longest time whether to sort this ink with the green or blue inks and ultimately settled on green. The ink shades first to a bluer tone before revealing some pink in the wettest parts of the line or the swatch. While you will see some shading with every type of nib, you'd need something a bit broader to really bring out the full spectrum of shading. The last ink for today is another Sailor and another chroma shading ink as well. Sailor Ayame is part of the Manyo line of inks. It's a greyish green with pink shading and a rim of green sheen. The combination of the base color, the shading and the sheen is very similar to Dominant Industry Winter Pine, but I'd say the pink in Sailor Ayame is brighter, more pronounced. Another difference, also in comparison to Ink Studio 162, is that Ayame doesn't need a broader nib to show its shading. Even a Japanese fine nib shows plenty of pink. And that's it, another 13 green inks. From these inks, the Great Wall of China and Moss Bark Green are probably my favorites. They both have that lovely unsaturated mossy green that I really like. I also think that Diamine Alpine is a really cool ink where the base color and the shimmer complement each other really well. Enjoy this little recording of the page now that all the inks have dried completely and you can really see all the shading, the sheen, the shimmer. This was the last selection of green inks for now. In the next video we'll be starting with a set of blue inks. I hope you enjoyed this video and I would love to hear what your favorite green ink is. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you don't want to miss the rest of the series, and I hope to see you in the next one. Take care. Bye!